Good morning, everyone. We will go ahead and get started. A copy of the Open Meetings Act is located on the north wall of the legislative chambers. And also an external defibrillator is available on the back wall of the chambers. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. With that, we will begin with the agenda for the Douglas County Board of Equalization. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Marie Boyle. Commissioner Mike Boyle. I know he is present.
Here.
There we go. Commissioner Kavanaugh. Commissioner Friend. Commissioner Morgan. Commissioner Rogers. Madam Chair.
Present. Item A, approval of the minutes of the Board of Equalization meeting held Tuesday, May 11th, 2021. And item B, call for a meeting and set Tuesday, May 25th, 2021 as the date for hearing on certified assessment corrections reflecting the addition of omitted property to the tax roll or increased value on property. Is there a motion to approve A and B? Motion by Commissioner Morgan, seconded by Commissioner Rogers. Questions or comments? Please vote.
I vote yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Commissioner Mike Boyle voting virtually, other commissioners voting in person.
Citizen comments. Is there anyone in the chamber wishing to speak to the Board of Equalization about an item not on the agenda? Seeing none, we will move to resolutions. Resolutions D through K. Please note that H has been removed from the agenda. Is there a motion to approve? Okay, there was a motion by Commissioner Rogers and seconded by Commissioner Morgan for resolutions D through K and adjourn, minus H.
I vote yes.
One moment, please. Sorry.
Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
As it reflects in many ways the country as a whole. So,
Commissioner Morgan. And Commissioner Mike Boyle, you vote yes?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes 7-0. Commissioner Mike Boyle voting virtually, other commissioners voting in person.
We will move to the agenda for the Douglas County Board of Commissioners. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Mike Boyle.
Present.
Commissioner Marie Boyle. Commissioner Kavanaugh. Commissioner Friend. Commissioner Morgan. Commissioner Rogers. Madam Chair.
Present. Item A, approval of the minutes of the Board of Commissioners meeting held Tuesday, May 11th, 2021. Please note the minutes for both pre-board meetings are also available. And item B, approval of claims submitted for payment process through Tuesday, May 18th, 2021. Is there a motion to approve A and B?
so moved.
Motion by Commissioner Rogers, seconded by Commissioner Maureen Boyle. Any questions or comments? Please vote.
I vote yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Commissioner Mike Boyle voting virtually, other commissioners voting in person.
We'll move to the consent agenda, items A through H. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Rogers, seconded by Commissioner Maureen Boyle. Questions or comments? Please vote.
Commissioner Borgeson.
Yes? Oh, I'm sorry. We don't have the pictures on. Hang on.
Oh, sorry.
There we go. Okay, Commissioner Mike.
Ask a question.
Yep.
Yes, I've had a contact from Ben Salazar and others in South Omaha about programming for Hispanic and Latino youth that are at the youth center, and I was wondering if Kim is present, if she could answer that question. Ben is online now too, but is Kim present?
Does it have anything to do with one of the agenda items for the,
I believe for the youth center, I don't have the agenda in front of me, but it's the items that Kim has on the agenda.
so the question is, are any of those for the Hispanic population?
Yes, right, exactly. And Mr. Salazar is on the line. He could ask, he may have further questions. Thank you. Kim?
Kim Havacati, Deputy County Administrator over Juvenile Justice. Yes, Commissioner, with regards to all of the contracts that are on the agenda for today for stability services with the home program, those services are available both in North and South Omaha and will serve both areas of the community. That's why we selected these particular providers to ensure we were being strategic around the county to meet where the needs of the youth in detention are.
Okay, so I would imagine that Mr. Salazar will probably, he can speak for himself, but would like more detail about what it involves, because it wasn't clear on that it did involve other ethnic groups. So we'll ask further questions to get that handled. And maybe Mr. Salazar wants to speak. He can speak for himself, obviously.
Well, if I have permission to speak, do I?
Go ahead, Mr. Salazar.
Good morning, Kim. Yeah, I just had a chance to review the names of the providers, and presumably most of these providers are located in the locations that they're going to serve. And I just didn't see anything that jumped out at me that appeared to be led by Latinos. Am I wrong?
Well, I think the key becomes, do they serve the Latino population? And all of these do serve the Latino population, yes.
Well, as a general principle, yeah, everybody serves, you know, people walk in the door and you can serve. But in South Omaha, as far as Latino-led efforts to provide alternatives in lieu of detention, I don't see anything that jumps out. So your answer that, no, these are just programs, fairly generic, everybody's welcome.
These are specific programs that are also probation programs, because our whole goal is to have continuity of services for youth, both pre-adjudicated and adjudicated. And Mr. Salazar, if there's any other entities out there that are interested in providing these services, we're more than willing to talk to them and look at contracting with them. These are our beginning services that we're working on. So if you know of any, I'm more than willing to talk to them and look at expanding these contracts for these services.
So then the answer to my question is, I don't think so, or no?
Well, I don't know how you tell when you look through the list of contractors whether they're Latino or not. Many of them do have Latino staff that deal with that community, which is what is important to us, Mr. Salazar.
Well, I'm familiar with most entities in South Omaha, especially in my community. And I just didn't see any names that registered, you know, in my mind as being led by Latinos. And I think you're not really, you're surrounding the question I'm asking, but you haven't answered it directly. So I don't want to repeat myself or be obnoxious, but I'm just curious about that maybe, because I have heard from a couple other folks in the community that said that they didn't know anything about this. They weren't contacted, weren't aware of this.
Like I said, if they are, have them contact me and I'll gladly talk to them and we'll look at contracting with them.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Well, maybe I could help that too. I'll work with Ben and get the list of some of these providers, and then I'll visit with Kim and Mr. Salazar. We'll get this all worked out. I think it's really important, and I know that Kim is sensitive to that, but maybe it doesn't reflect that in the contracts that are being talked about today. But we'll see that they are, and I know that Kim is favorable to doing that. It's a real need, obviously. So,
well, yeah, can I interject one thing that I think folks should know something about, Mike? And I just the other day from Kim herself, which is there is a great disparity in the numbers of runaway youth among girls of Latino descent, Latino origin. And I'm concerned about that issue because I don't think it's been widely accepted or recognized that that's a fact that's in existence for youth services and youth numbers, is that there's an alarming number of Latina girls, this disproportionate number, that are running away from home. And I would think that maybe this would be in the line of origin on some of these programs that people in South Omaha, yeah, obviously we have to pick up the ball as a community in South Omaha and say, look, here's a program that we want to establish specifically for these Latino girls that are running away from home in such disproportionate numbers. I think the commissioners should know that, that's important to the community, and there's got to be a way to broach that subject and find some funding for that.
Thank you.
I agree, and we'll get on that too, Ben. I'm very glad you contacted me, and we'll get on this too. And I
1
know that
minute.
I was open to that.
Okay, we'll continue our discussions with Kim. Thank you.
Thanks,
There
Ben.
was a
Thanks,
motion.
Kim.
Yep, there was a motion and a second. Please vote.
I vote yes.
Okay. Motion passes 7-0. Commissioner Mike Boyle voting virtually, all other commissioners voting in person.
Citizen comments. Is there anyone wishing to speak to the Board of Commissioners about an item not on the agenda?
Good morning. Larry Storr, 5015 Lafayette Avenue, Omaha, 68132. I have some things to submit to Dan, and I won't read them all. I'll just give a little notice as to what they are. But I want to continue with what I was talking about last week, because I'm getting increasingly concerned about the discourse in Nebraska and in the nation about critical race theory, Marxism, et cetera, et cetera. I know a lot of you are too busy to be on top of those things like I am, but there's an awful lot of citizens that are really getting rather upset with all this that seems to be encroaching on our civil liberties and our Constitution. It really topped it off for me last night to give you an example of transparency not being practiced in our citizens' bodies. I did go to the Omaha School Board. Most citizens work. Most citizens don't have time to go on the internet and look at your agendas and things. So I went down there last night thinking I might want to comment. If you're not there well ahead of time in order to read their quick synopsis that doesn't explain anything of their agenda, you find out that if you don't present your name and address in written form to them within 5 minutes of the start of the meeting, you're entirely out of luck. So I'm thinking, well, it's a good thing there weren't a lot of people there last night, because they would have been out of luck. In many cases, they're out of luck when they come to this chamber, whether it's this board or the next one. We got to fight that kind of stuff. That is limiting citizens' right to petition their government. The people do not understand that. And one of the reasons why is this culture of anti-American Constitution. Marxism is moving in real fast. And here's some articles starting with Mark Levin, National Review, and one other that will point out for you people the real dangers which you're not aware of. But these things need to be talked about in these chambers, because it's going to come to the forefront very soon. And when people start talking reparations, you're going to have a lot of angry citizens. You have to fight this business. I'm not guilty of a lot of things, but the national agenda wants to have you blame us all. And they send their representatives here to convince you to do that. I'm against that. And I will be against that every time it comes up.
Anyone else wishing to speak to the Board of Commissioners about an item not on the agenda?
Luis Jimenez, 3306 Burt Street. Hello, Commissioners. I just want to let you guys know that I got the Johnson & Johnson vaccine early part of May, when it was back over at North Omaha Fort Omaha campus MCC location. They have a drive-through, and it was a one-off, one shot, and I'm kind of concerned that there's quite a number of people that don't want to get the vaccine. whether it's the 2-shot or the Johnson & Johnson. I don't know what can be done, maybe some marketing. And knowing where to go put your information for an appointment. It's on the Douglas County website, but you got to do some navigating online, and maybe a mailer. I like mailers. I think they're effective. But anyway, thank you for your time.
Anyone else wishing to speak to the Board of Commissioners about an item not on the agenda? Seeing none, we will move to presentations, and we have our COVID-19 update and COVID-19 vaccination plan update presented by Dr. Adi Poor. Good morning, Doctor.
Good morning, Commissioners. Can you hear me? I have some issues this morning.
No,
okay. So it's nice to follow your presenter before, and I'm so glad that he got vaccinated. And yes, we are trying to do all that is necessary to really make it easy for individuals to get vaccinated. And we are doing flyers, we are doing news releases every day. I know Ben Salazar has really been active, but the more we can get the word out, and there are always different ways to do it, I would encourage everybody. So as of today, we have tested 61% of our individuals in Douglas County, or 347,905 individuals. 12.5% of those individuals have tested positive up to now. Our 7-day rolling average is really at 7.8 new cases per 100,000. And I have to tell you, that is the lowest it has been since last April 25th. That's April 25th, 2020. We haven't been as low as that since then. The cases last week had a decrease of 38%, and we had a decrease of 13% in testing, which meant, of course, our cases were further decreased than our testing. So not everything can be explained by decreased testing. But therefore, our positivity rate last week was 4.1%. I have to tell you, I have never seen that low a positivity rate since we started to report on this pandemic. 4.1%. We always wanted to be below 5. Now we are below 5. Hospitalization is a success story too. We have had 3 days where we had less than 60 people in the Omaha area hospital. So as of tonight, we had 57 COVID patients. We had 22 of them in the ICU and 12 on ventilators. We have reported 710 deaths from the beginning of this pandemic, 17 of them in April. Going over to vaccinations, to just give you all a little bit an update, we have now administered in total more than 550,000 doses of vaccine, 478,428 to Douglas County residents. And I saw Commissioner Boyle clap, and I am in awe of this. Let's talk about residents who have received at least one dose. 61.4% of those who are eligible at this time, and 54.4% are fully vaccinated. We are the second health district in the state of Nebraska that has numbers above 50% fully vaccinated. It's us, Omaha, and Lincoln. And kudos to our community of stepping up, getting vaccinated. That compares to a low in the West Central District, which is North Platte area, of 32% of their population is fully vaccinated, and we have 54.4%. And I'm sure today we are even higher than that. When we look at our race, the highest one is in our Asian population. 61.4% of that population have received at least one dose. That's followed by whites and Hispanics. And when we look at them, who has made the biggest jump for the last week since I last talked to you? The highest increase has been seen in the Hispanic population. Mr. Ben Salazar, I hope you are listening. Your outreach is working. It's working if we get our community engaged and give them the right information that they have. So when we look at age groups, we have now 41% of our younger ones, 16 to 19 years, that have been vaccinated. That's a good thing too. That's the highest increase, 1.9% increase from last week. So 16 to 19 years old are really stepping up. When we look at that, what have we done to our most vulnerable one? You remember we always said those 65 years and above. 88% 65 years and above are fully vaccinated. I think then you have heard last week we had the ACIP approving the Pfizer vaccine for those 12 to 15 years of age. And we have really been trying to encouraging those younger individuals, therefore, to get tested. We started to have our site up Thursday for those 12 years and up. And as of yesterday, we had 2,370 doses that we have given to that age group, that young age group, 12 to 15 years of age. And I think that's great. We now have Children's Hospital is doing a vaccination. CHI is doing vaccines. We are in contact with Village Point Pediatrics, SOMA, and the Heart Ministry, and they are all trying to see that they are going to be approved by the state as quickly as possible so that they can provide a vaccine. The only other thing I think I want to share with you, which is also a success, is past Friday, for the first time at our community, at our STD clinic here on the county health department site on 41st and Pacific. We had the first clinic where we offered all 3 vaccines. People didn't need an appointment. They just could walk in. And we provided 67 doses that day. Pfizer, J&J, Moderna, depending on the age group, those 12 and above, they can only receive Pfizer at this time. But it was a nice opportunity, again, for everyone in Douglas County not to have any excuses that there is not, I'm thinking this morning I would like to get a vaccine. Yes, we have vaccine available. You just walk in. And so again, we are trying to do everything we can for our community. As I shared with you last time, this is the week where we are going to churches. We are going Trinity Lutheran, Salem Baptist, Pleasant Green Baptist Church, New Life Presbyterian Church, and Central Pastoral Tepeyac on June 5th. Really reaching out to churches, because churches are telling us, yes, they want to be part of the community. Everybody wants to have a piece and wants to help us getting back to normal. That's kind of my report for today. Any questions you may have for me?
Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Thank you. This is great news. The percentages that we're seeing all going up are really encouraging. I was wondering the percentage of total vaccination in our entire population in Douglas County. We talked a little bit about this last week. That number is in the mid 500,000s. So the fully vaccinated 54.4% is based on a subset of that total population. Do you know what the total population fully vaccinated in Douglas County number is?
The total population is 232,580.
In the percentage to the total population of that?
I would have to calculate that. I have not calculated that, but that's pretty easy to do if you give me
Right. I think that we talked last week, and you indicated that the number that you were working on in terms of total population was near, I want to say, 550,000 individuals. Is that right?
The doses that we have given. So let me just tell you the number, Commissioner. If you look at the entire population, we have fully vaccinated 40.7% of our entire population in Douglas County, the 571,000.
That's great. And this, population that's not currently getting vaccinated is kind of the very, very young, 0 to 12-year-old children. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Any idea, you hearing anything from CDC or anybody else of when that population will be available for vaccination?
Yeah, I would have to say what I hear from the experts is it's probably going to be this fall.
This fall, okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Maureen Boyle.
Hello, Dr. Poor. Just a couple things. One is, do you have the demographics of the hospitalized patients at this point?
No, we don't. And again, we ask the state every time, and they are saying, well, probably next week. So no, we don't.
Okay. And then the other thing is, what's with the mask mandate ending next week for the city council? What's your take on the CDC guidelines that were suggested last week regarding masks?
I think the CDC guidelines came very quickly and surprised many of us. And I do think I would have preferred a little bit more leeway so businesses could prepare for it. I think we have a little bit leeway because the mask mandate expires on May 25th. So until then, there is really not going to be any change in Douglas County. I think at that time, I would just say to everyone, I still strongly encourage wearing masks for those who are not fully vaccinated.
Would you suggest then that those who are fully vaccinated can live life as usual again?
I think for those who are fully vaccinated, we need to recognize that these vaccines are really very effective. They are effective in protecting you from getting the virus, and they also show very little transmission, if any transmission, that you could provide when you are fully vaccinated to an individual who is not fully vaccinated. So I would say to everybody who is fully vaccinated and 2 weeks thereafter, they can start to take, once the mask mandate is lifted, they can start to take small steps. I think you may have read the article today. I don't think we go back from one day to the other, but I think we are taking incremental steps towards a normalcy.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Mike Friend.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the report, Dr. Poor. Appreciate it. We may not have these metrics. Can you tell me, and if I heard it already, I apologize to everyone. It's gone. Can you tell me what the numbers look like if we have them of someone in Douglas County, for example, who's tested positive and then not received any vaccinations, okay? And then that particular person tested again positive for a second time, right? Do we have numbers that indicate anything like that?
So what you are talking about, commissioners, are reinfections. And yes, we do have numbers. I don't have them in front of me, but they are very few who have reinfections.
And could you opine on, because let me give you a quick anecdote. I contracted COVID in November, and then my doctor actually said, and other doctors actually told me, look, you got about 90 days. So are we still holding to that metric? Do you know?
We are a little bit expanding that metric, and I think what you hear often, people now talk about 120 days as research goes on and as we have more information. So that 90 days has been expanded a little bit.
Okay, that makes sense. And the reason that I bring that up, just so we have a little context, is that I've actually talked to people, and I think that this, from a public information standpoint, is pretty important, because if you actually talk to people who said, look, I had it, I'm not worried about it, I'm not going to get the vaccines, that's an argument. I mean, they're making an argument. They're saying, well, look, I just had it 60 days ago. Why should I go get a Johnson & Johnson vaccine or something else? So we're putting pressure on people to get the vaccines, right? Which is understandable. But I'm trying to put some context into why some people, there might be confusion out there in the public. So in other words, somebody contracts it, they test positive. If they're fortunate, they spend 3 days in agony, and then they're better and they go out. That's where I was going with this, right? I'm using it almost as a public information forum. So I'll just end there.
Yeah, and Commissioner, what we said, or what has been said for a long time, is that even those individuals who had COVID should be vaccinated, but they potentially can wait a little bit longer. They don't need to be at the front of the line, but the immunity that they found in those individuals varied quite a bit. And they felt that the immunity from the vaccine was much stronger than the immunity from the COVID illness. And so that's why they are encouraging those individuals to get vaccinated too, even so they had COVID.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Dr. Poor? All right, thank you, Dr. Poor.
Thank you.
Next presentation is by a Judge Patrick McDermott regarding the April 12, 2021 Jail Standards Board letter on the design and operation of the new Douglas County Youth Center.
Thank you. Madam Chairman, members of the Commission, good morning. My name is Patrick McDermott. I'm a retired county court judge from the 5th Judicial District. I served primarily in Wahoo and Schuyler with some service in the juvenile court in Columbus. I know most of you. I represented Dave Lamphere 2 years ago when we filed suit to try and secure a vote of the people on this particular project. We argued that case. Your attorneys, who were excellent attorneys, argued the other side. They prevailed. After some discussion with my client, we didn't waste anybody's time by appealing that. And I now accept, as does my former client, that this project's going to go forward. My purpose is to ask you to consider things that you can fix now before the building is constructed that will ensure its usefulness and ensure that it passes the jail standards, particularly with respect to occupancy when that time comes. So in that vein, I'm going to ask you just to consider some things. Now, the first thing that hit me immediately in that letter was conference rooms. It's well-settled law that juveniles, with the exception of trial by jury, enjoy all the same protections of the Constitution when they are charged with a criminal-like offense. That was settled in In re Galt and In re Winship years ago. If you look at Title 83, which is the title that governs juvenile detention facilities, you will find that it also mentions the fact that juveniles have a right to counsel. Now, right to counsel has a lot of aspects, but the main and central themes are that you have to have access to your attorney and a reasonable right to participate in the preparation of your own defense. The original plan only had one conference room for 64 inmates. In this jurisdiction, every juvenile petitioned against has an attorney appointed automatically. It was part of a pilot project, so every child is represented. That means those attorneys have to have access. One conference room for 64 inmates was not going to be physically possible for them to spend 1 hour a week with their client. HDR now proposes 4 conference rooms. I'm not able to exactly discern what they look like on the schematics because I'm not an engineer or an architect. But I'm relying upon you to insist that those conference rooms be adequate, that they be private, so there can be meaningful conference between juveniles and attorneys. That's a matter of constitutional law. You don't want this thing to get tied up in Sixth Amendment litigation. There's a statutory duty of county court judges and separate juvenile court judges to advise children of their rights with respect to counsel. So that's one concern I had. I think HDR is making an effort to solve that problem, but I'm going to ask you to ensure that you are each satisfied that that is being provided to the kids. The second issue that I want to discuss with you is the capacity problems. The design of this facility calls for a 7 by 11 foot or 77 square foot sleeping rooms. The regulations also have certain requirements with respect to those sleeping rooms. Any room less than 90 square feet can never be modified to double occupancy. You're locking yourselves in to single occupancy rooms, which is going to affect ultimately your flexibility. So I think that's a serious issue as the keeper of the tax dollars of the public for you to consider. Natural light would not seem to be a deal breaker, but it can be, because the regulations provide that there must be access to natural light. They talk about the candle power at 3 feet from the floor, which I don't understand, but I trust that the architects and engineers do. In adult institutions, there's a notion called equivalency, where if you're going to do just about the same thing, you can get a waiver. It's like getting a variance in a planning commission. There is no similar provision in Title 83, Chapter 18 for juvenile facilities. Equivalency is not mentioned, so I'm not sure that it's something jail standards could waive. That could result in your capacity being reduced from 64 to 48, because 16 of those rooms would not qualify under the current regulations. Now, I think there's a solution to that problem, something that we have long sought in the juvenile arena, and that's a separation of the two populations of juveniles detained. Juveniles who are detained for juvenile court and juveniles who are awaiting prosecution in adult courts. That's a bad population. You know, years ago, we disallowed the placing of status offenders in the youth center for the reason that exposure of kids who had not committed crimes to kids who did was a dangerous exposure, probably not good from a mental health standpoint. We still have that same problem. Kids that are charged with juvenile offenses, particularly misdemeanors, would be exposed to those children who are charged with more serious crime. Now, I know programmatically they try to keep them as separate as possible, but it's still a bad combination. If you're going to be in a numbers crunch, I mean, your current populations are 31 juveniles who are await juvenile court, 27 who await adult court. Those kids waiting juvenile court are usually in the center about 30 days. The ones awaiting adult prosecution may be there 100, 150 days. So they're around a lot. You don't want to get the younger kids exposed to those older and more hardened kids. It just doesn't have a good outcome. I think keeping the 42nd Street facility available for the adult charged juveniles makes a lot of sense. It means that your facility downtown can really emphasize the juvenile justice approach, mitigate the trauma-inflicting impacts of congregate care. Every congregate care situation, and that's where group homes, Boys Town, all of those places, there's an element of trauma for the kids. But if you can really focus your programming on the younger and least hardened kids, you have a real opportunity to change outcomes and to build a pathway to responsible adulthood as opposed to a pathway to prison. Now, finally, in the last slide is simply a sources slide. It gives you an idea of where, or I'm sorry, excuse me, I skipped the parking thing. Food and laundry, I think HDR has made an accommodation for. But parking, I really found this to be interesting, that it's referenced directly in Chapter 18, paragraph 032, and it says sufficient parking for visitors and official vehicles shall be provided on site. That gets tricky because I'm not sure what on site means. But nonetheless, that's in the regulations. It's required. And I don't think, at least I'm not aware of any plan that regards those particular issues, but I think it's something you need to be aware of because you've got to get this thing by jail standards, and they're going to follow their own regulations. Lastly, where did this stuff come from that I'm saying? Those were the sources. Every one of those documents, letters, all of those things are available to you. I would beg you to read those, particularly read all of Chapter 18 of Title 83, so you are really aware of what can happen with jail standards so that you get good, solid designs. I think your designers are making a good faith effort to attempt to use trauma-informed approaches. They're working hard at that. But I am personally interested. I know that the final plans aren't ready. I hope when they are that you will permit the public, people like me, to look at them so we have some idea of what's really being presented. We, of course, do have the right to appear at the Jail Standards Commission hearings for that purpose. Now, I'm happy to answer any inquiries that any commissioner would have.
Commissioner Kavanaugh?
Thanks for this, Judge. And I think you sent it to us electronically. Do we have hard copies as well? I'm kind of an analog guy. Or could you provide the clerk with a hard copy so we could get?
Yes, I can. I have a couple of hard copies with me. I'll provide the clerk with a copy of that. I probably have hard copies of most everything I had in sources, so I could give a complete set to the clerk if I have a few minutes after this to dig through and make sure that they're.
Thank you. So, you know, it's kind of, I guess, a bit of a head shaker that the original design did not include a kitchen, did not include laundry, that the cells are closet-sized with no natural light, no windows. And the jail standards picked up on this. I think they had 11 total areas of concern that they picked up on. And we're well into this. We're years into this project. I mean, these items were raised initially by me and others as problems going forward. including the smaller capacity that you pointed out relative to the average daily population of the youth center on 42nd Street. So it's really kind of troubling that now, years into this, we have these designs that are problems with the jail standards people. And the answer is, well, HDR will redo the drawings. Have you had access to the drawings, the original?
Not as yet. I'm hoping that either HDR will make those available through the nonprofit corporation so that the public and people like me can see them. If not, they would be available through the commission.
Okay, well, that would be great. You'd like to see those, I think.
I would. I would. Not that I'm very good at reading them, but I would like to see them.
This is resulting in anybody who's ever done any home project in what you call change orders. Change orders are expensive. And this project's already gone over its $120 million bond budget by millions and millions of dollars. And so these change orders raise the question of who's going to pay for this? Who's going to pay for these additional changes on foreseeable things like, oh, we didn't have a kitchen, we didn't have a laundry, we don't have any natural light. These are all way, way foreseeable at the beginning, outset of this project by the private corporation. And I'm sure they're delighted to do the change orders as long as they're paid for. So the question really becomes, who's going to pay for fixing the problems that were designed in this original thing? But the idea that we're going to put kids in 7x11 cells with no natural light is really, really troubling, because the eyes on the prize is this is supposed to help kids. We've heard a lot about trauma-informed. You put a kid in a 7x11 cell with no light, that's trauma-inducing in the extreme. So it's really problematic that now, late into this project, the private corporation turns up to have designed a facility that's inadequate way before we even get to the jail standards, who are going to have to approve it before it can be operational. The bottom line, I think, I take from your testimony is solve many of these problems by just separating the population. The felony charges, kids charged with murder, rape, robbery, and the juvenile charges, many of them very, very minor. Separate those two populations by leaving the felony charges on 42nd Street.
1 minute.
And take the juvenile kids down to where the juvenile courts are going to be in this new facility downtown. Is that right?
I think that is a solution. Now, in fairness, I probably stand responsible for 10 months of the delay, from the day I filed the lawsuit till the day that I filed the notice of waiver of a right of appeal. So some of that was my fault. Secondly, I'm a fan of the smaller population, because if there's not as much room in the inn, we can't put as many kids in there, which I think contributes to my view of juvenile justice. But I may be in the minority there, and we need places for kids at times. We need to protect them, sometimes from themselves. And a highly structured temporary placement may be the only thing.
So I'll come back to you.
Time. Any other questions or comments? Can you turn your light on again, Commissioner Kavanaugh, so I can, thank you. Go ahead.
So the original design had one conference room for 64 children to consult with their attorneys in, is that correct?
That was my understanding. That seems to be what HDR acknowledges in their letter of April 21st.
The solution on the change order that somebody will pay for is to expand that one conference room in the original design for 64 kids, and you did the math on how that's impossible for them to adequately consult their attorneys, is to go to 4. But that's not just for attorneys, that's for everybody.
That would be for any private visitation. That would include attorneys, psychologists, medical practitioners, priests, pastors, folks like that. Right. I think you could, for those who are lawyers, anything that's a privileged communication.
a minimum, you're a lawyer as well as a judge, a minimum period of consultation with your client in jail usually is what period of time?
I think it has to be at least 30 minutes each time, up to an hour. It depends on where you are. If you're preparing the trial, it has to be a great deal more than that.
Right.
But I think probably a lot of lawyers in the 5th District could recite my lecture from memory on if you're appointed by this court to represent a juvenile and that juvenile is in any out-of-home placement, you will see them once a week. Just no excuses. Those kids need to know somebody's watching out for them.
I appreciate your expertise and your decades of experience in this area and the time that you've taken as a private citizen to examine the project ongoing. So in addition to the problems that they have regarding the Title 83 items that you pointed out, and the problems with not having a kitchen or laundry facilities and the tiny cells, there's a problem. It's like the elephant in the middle of the room. The population continues to be about 80% minority kids.
Yeah.
Is there anything in any of this that indicates that we're going to quit locking up minority populations in either of these adult or felony or juvenile populations of kids?
That's really a hugely broad question. It has to do with societal structures, social isolation, lack of opportunity, lack of strong families, lack of educational opportunities. There are some jurisdictions that are heavily minority. I think of Cook County has been a leader in trying to remedy those situations. When I was with the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges on its board of directors, we discussed that at length. What programming can be effective in trying to reduce these populations? And the answer invariably is better community-based programs for those youth. That's easy to say, but that's very expensive. These are times of tight budgets. It makes it very hard for political subdivisions to commit to that, but that's really where it's at, and particularly in the area of the number of kids and young adults who find themselves incarcerated mostly because they suffer from either substance abuse or mental health issues. They don't get treated very effectively.
1 minute.
In those things.
And again, thank you for taking your time to review this, but sounds like you've done your usual thorough job of reviewing all of the materials and going back into the history, not only of your own experience as a judge, but the history of this project. There doesn't seem to be any addressing of that issue in any of the documents or proposals or items that you've seen in this regard. None, relative to the 80% minority, majority locked up kids in this new proposed.
I haven't seen any of the programming that they're proposing. I haven't asked for it yet. I will be looking at those things, but I mean, Ms. Havacati is an old hand. She's been doing this almost as long as I have.
She'll have an opportunity to speak. It's
Time.
just unfortunate that we
Thank you,
don't
Commissioner
address this.
Kavanaugh. Time. Commissioner Maureen Boyle.
I just have a couple comments more than anything. First and foremost, thank you, Judge McDermott, for coming down and just putting it in really a quick little summary of things. I agree with really a lot of what you're saying. One is that this is going forward, this is happening. Second is I do feel like the capacity issue is the way you described it is really what I see it too. We don't want to build more capacity. The less capacity we have, the more it turns our hands to go towards programming and getting kids out and trying to make them better people rather than hardening them. So if we don't have the room, it kind of makes us think creatively on how do we take care of these kids in a better way. The tricky thing is when we get those kids who are a bit hardened, where do we draw the line? Is it the kids that are, rape, murder? What about guns? So those are the kind of the gray areas. And then so I really like the idea of this being a smaller facility and having programming up and running, and I completely agree with that. And the programming, I know Kim Havakati is working on it. I've seen some things that look promising in here. I think we just, my third point really is just we need to have an update about the JCDC here at the commission, so regular citizens can hear and see some of the things that I feel like I'm privy to as a commissioner. And it's available. It's just not really just right out in front of us. So I think I would like to see that a presentation here from our 501c3 that's put together to do this. So thank you. That's more a comment more than anything.
Commissioner, I would point out to you that the American Academy of Pediatricians does a huge amount of work in this area, and they are a valuable resource. So you may have colleagues who are pediatricians who could be very helpful in this.
It's true.
Thank you. Commissioner Mike Boyle.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say thank you very much, Judge, for coming down and raising these issues in a very constructive way. One of the things I want to ask is something I think that's very positive, and that is what the Sherwood Foundation is doing with Nick Giuliano north, somewhere near 56 and Ames. I'm not exactly sure of the address. I visited with Nick. He's a 25-year experience with Boys Town, and he's now with Sherwood, and they're building a facility out there to handle the misdemeanors types. I'm not really sure exactly where you'd be, not the kids with guns and so forth. And I visited with him. I said, "Where are you getting where are the children coming from?" And he said, "Your place." And I think it's a pretty important thing to discuss because they're building out there and they're planning, but we really haven't had any, I don't know of any public discussion of who's going there and who's paying for it and operations. I think it's something we should get on the table and discuss because it has a tremendous effect on the number of people we have. The other thing I'm concerned about is continuing to operate 42nd Street. That's never been budgeted. It's a very expensive proposition. I know there's been talk of trying to turn it into a state institution to make it for more violent youth, which is a possibility, but I don't know how that sets well with the neighborhoods, for starters. The other thing is we need to accelerate this. These children waiting for adult court, waiting until 150 days is not acceptable. Somehow we need to accelerate that and get them into court as fast as possible. I'm also concerned about bus services. I've asked the question many times, and I've actually looked at coming from 42nd and Sorensen downtown, and it takes 2 transfers. There's there's east and west service, but not so much north and south that it's close to the building. Parking is another one. I've suggested repeatedly that we do something about adjacent buildings and even closing 18th Street for parking for parents. The size of the room bothers me a lot, not only because of just the size. When you walk into a room that's 77 square feet, it's very confining, and with no natural light, that's just not acceptable. We've got to figure that one out. Last thing, I guess, I have a couple things I'd like to say. I brought up before that when these kids are told to go on probation and then report, they're not organized. And I make a comment about neither am I. And so these kids who do not lead organized lives are suddenly told to turn up at 9 o'clock, 2 weeks for probation. They violate probation, and then it starts down the big black funnel. I'm really concerned about it. And lastly, what I'll say, I repeatedly say over and over, we got to find some way to not do probation because it's setting them up for failure. They've got to find another way to deal with that. And lastly, I'd say that I think the root cause of this is poverty. When children don't have money, when fathers are unemployed, and if you look at the photos back following World War II, there's a line of white people lining up to get mortgages. The blacks were written out of it, and they were never allowed to participate because of the racial attitudes back then that sometimes, frankly, prevail to today. So we need to, President Biden is working on some things, but we need to come to grips with the unfairness. Call it reparations. I don't know what you want to call it, but I think it's fairness of African Americans and brown people being able to get mortgages like the Caucasians did following World War II. It made a big difference and it could make a big difference in how this whole population is treated. That's my very quick summary. And Judge McDermott, I appreciate your coming down and making the presentation you did. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Larry?
Oh, excuse me. Thank you, sir. Larry Storr, 5015 Lafayette Avenue, 68132. I was in on this way back when it all started. And I remember one day I set 3 little shells out here for the shell game where you put a pea under the pot and you bet against the dealer or the sleight of hand with the cards or the Johnny Carson used car salesman routine. A lot of the discussion was the citizens ought to be able to vote on it, but they didn't get to. There's private corporations running our lives now. We want to set the kids free. Why don't we line them up in the morning outside the complex out there that we ought to be using? Like the Omaha, Oklahoma land rush, fire the gun and let them run to the new complex out on Ames. We already spent the money there. We already own the property out there, and there's plenty of space for people to park right across the street. So maybe the bait and switch in this game is, oh, we can get out of this. Let's give the new building to the judges and the lawyers. And then we'll go ahead and spend more money out there on the social services complex. You know, I get tired of trying to make point across that, well, the Open Meetings Act talks about reasonableness. There's a reasonableness test, but there's also a smell test. There's backroom politics. Citizens like me don't get involved in backroom politics because we don't have the power. But there's been a lot of that in this whole thing. So if you want to have the new building handy for the judges and the lawyers, then go ahead and do it. You will anyway. But get started on the complex out there. Already own it. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Luis Jimenez, 3306 Bird Street. I think the judge did a good job presenting some alternative issues that this project might encounter, and makes a good point that it's early on. I mean, at this stage, you can do something about those issues that he raises. I like hearing from folks like that because of their experience. It makes me understand this project better. So I think it is a good idea, as Commissioner Maureen Boyle suggests, that the JCDC representative comes and makes a presentation for the citizenry and for the board members in open forum. I'm also concerned about the cost. That has been an issue from the onset of this project, and it has the truth is it is above, it's gone over budget, and it's not on time. It's over budget, and the board said as much last year when it approved $7 million in inflation. I forget who asked for that money. I think it might have been the building commission. I think that or somebody involved with the project. One thing that I've noticed over the last decade is that the building commission does pay for inflation for construction projects. And I don't know if that's appropriate. I think that, and it's about the same amount often, $10 million. It's like a routine now with the projects that the building commission oversees. I don't know if that's inappropriate or if that is something that maybe a federal prosecutor should look into. Look at what the building commission is approving, or the money that they're approving. But that's an aside. I think that the idea of bringing in the nonprofit to explain the project to the city is a good idea. I still don't know what kind of space the judges are going to have in their chambers, for their chambers. That's one of the things that I am interested in knowing. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Thank you. We do have a public hearing. Approval of amendment to special use permit authorized by County Resolution 629 adopted September 10, 2019 to allow a controlled impact use, specifically wedding reception retreat venue on approximately 180 acres. Address of 23150 Pawnee Road. And I won't read the rest. I'll let Dave Forrest give us a summary of this presentation that was before the planning board and now coming before us. I am opening the public hearing.
Good morning, Commissioners. In September of 2019, the Board of County Commissioners approved a special use permit for a wedding venue business at 23150 Pawnee Road. And as part of that special use permit, there was a condition that no building on the site shall be larger than 10,000 square feet.
Mr. Forrest, I didn't mean to interrupt. Would you identify yourself, though, for the record?
Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Dave Forrest. I'm the Planning and Zoning Coordinator for Douglas County. As I said, there was a condition in that special use permit that the no building on the site be greater than 10,000 square feet. And the idea behind that condition was that we wanted to limit the number of people who could come to this venue to 350 people. Since that time, design has been underway. The owner of the facility is contracted with an architect, and they've been working on designs, and they've discovered that a 10,000 square foot building maximum is not going to give them the kind of building that they need to serve their customers. And so they came back to the Planning Commission in April with a request that the special use permit, that specifically that one condition, be changed from a 10,000 square foot maximum to a 350 person maximum. There was a public hearing on April 14th before the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission did approve that request with a condition, an additional condition, that the applicant provide the county a model rental agreement providing for the 350 person maximum and post that maximum occupancy appropriately in the building. There was one person at the Planning Commission hearing who voiced opposition, and his opposition was basically that he wanted to see the final design set before the Planning Commission would render a decision. The Planning Commission felt that it was inappropriate for them to require the applicant to do that given the expense. So what you have before you today, we have a public hearing on an amended special use permit, and I do have representatives from the building owner here who are available to speak.
Thank you. Commissioner Maureen Boyle.
So just, does this mean that there would be no limit on the size of this building? Because we're going by occupancy? Or is there a certain architectural rule that says you need 10 square feet per person?
There are rules, and I think what they're, and perhaps the applicant's representative could speak to this better, but I think that in fact, I would actually invite that person up if that's okay to speak to the size of the building they're
appreciate
contemplating.
That. Mm-hmm. Like I said, I'm not necessarily opposed. I just don't understand some things like that. So,
good morning, Commissioners. Martin Pelster, 2120 South 72nd Street, suite number 1200, Omaha, Nebraska, on behalf of the applicant. To answer your question, there are limitations. We're probably in a more practical limitation in that we may be limited to less than 350 people just by fire code and things of that nature, depending on whether or not we can have a fire sprinkler system with the water wells, because we have water wells out there. So we're still again in the design stage, and we're planning, looking at those issues. So it may be a situation where just by fire codes we're going to be limited to 300 people anyway. But as a practical matter, cost is obviously an issue. We don't want to go larger. Right now, the plans that we have look to be around 16,000 square feet. The footprint of the building is not getting a whole lot larger, but with the design, we're moving a lot of things upstairs to a second floor to accommodate the banquet facility on the main floor. We want to have a separate chapel so that we can move people from the chapel to the banquet facility without having to flip tables and things of that nature. So it's just, as we design this building and we want to get what is going to be a very good product, we just need more square footage, but we don't plan to go over, right now we're looking at about 17,000 square feet.
Okay, but based on this, there's a potential you could make it 100,000 square feet.
No, obviously, that just as a practical matter, we don't want to go much larger because, from a cost standpoint, we do not want to go over 350 people per building out there, because that was a huge issue when we were going the first time around for the application. We told people at the time we're limiting to 350 people per building. We're not increasing the traffic. We're not increasing the noise. We're just increasing the size of the building. We don't want to go anything larger than we need to for that.
I think that's what I was kind of getting at. So,
Yeah,
okay,
so-
good. All right, thank you.
Okay.
Commissioner Mike Friend?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And it's Martin, correct?
Yes.
Martin, thanks for providing some clarification. Normally, I would say I'm not the type of person who, I'm probably the type of person who vehemently opposes government's intervention and essentially telling landowners what they can do with their property, but there are always qualifying factors, right? To me, a couple of the qualifying factors under these circumstances could be, do we have an indication or do we have an understanding, A, of what neighbors, and this is a large plot of land, but what neighbors actually think of the potential structural change, if they even understand it, and that it's actually being sought.
Yes.
And B, what do they think of the utilization of the land that's actually occurring right now? So is there any feedback or understanding? So, right, I'll just leave it there.
No, well, I guess at the initial stage, there was opposition, mainly because of the amount of traffic that was going to be in the area and the sound. But we've obviously got past that because the application was granted. Currently, we're not really changing much other than the size of the building. We had a public hearing before the Planning Commission. We did have one person speak in opposition. But other than that, and there was at least one or two other people there that were neighbors but didn't speak. So, right now, I don't think there's any opposition to the increase in size as far as I know.
And finally, we have people that laugh when I say this. I'll try to be brief with this, but what concerns me is what could end up happening to not just every one of the county commissioners here. It could happen with citizens. It could also happen ostensibly with others who are involved in some of this decision-making. Is 3 or 4 months down the road, the unknown occurs. So in other words, I've worked security and I've done things in some of these venues. They do get loud. There are fights. There's traffic that some neighbors and people just didn't anticipate. I guess what I'm getting at is, I don't want to be surprised 7 months from now with information that I did not have now. And this is good, but I guess I just was looking for a little bit of reassurance.
Yeah.
There's utilization occurring now that doesn't deviate necessarily from what's going to happen if this actually gets approved, correct?
Right. I mean, the initial application for a special use permit was granted 2 years ago, okay? And
All
there were a number of conditions placed on that to keep that, to address all the concerns that you're just talking about right now. So those things none of those things are changing. We addressed all those concerns, and we agreed to all these conditions to address the concerns that you're bringing up at the moment. What we're asking for now is just to change one condition to allow us to increase the size of the building, but not to increase the number of guests that are going to be in the area. So none of the sound issues not going to change, the traffic issues not going to change. The only thing that's going to change is that we're going to make a better building, a larger building, more square footage, something that is more accommodating to our guests, and is going to be a better product for Douglas County. It's going to be, and probably more value, in my opinion.
Okay, thanks, Martin. And finally, let's say this is the 180 acres, right? Can you tell me where the existing facility is located within that 180 acres?
1 minute.
So
Can we blow that up just a little?
you see where I'm going with this?
Yes, absolutely. And I'll try to answer your questions. And I'm looking at
This cup isn't 180 acres.
looking at the screen again. It's this is highway. So this is south over here. This is Pawnee Road right here. The entry is right here. My client lives right here in acreage here. There's a road that runs up to the lake is right in this area right here. This is the facility we're working on at the moment. There's another one that's planned down in this area, and these are parking areas right here. There's a wedding venue, an outside wedding venue where we just have weddings out there, and and the conditions require that we can't have loud music and things of that nature. So all of the residents or people that live over, this is their boundary line, and they have a large acreage, and so they are a large distance away. I mean, they're talking
Time.
At least a half mile.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Mike Boyle?
Yes, I wanted to ask, are you under City of Omaha zoning, or if you're before us, you must be under Douglas County, is that correct?
It's Douglas County.
Okay, and I'm concerned about the fire code. Are you, what fire code are you following, state or the county, or what fire code are you working with?
Well, that's you're kind of getting over my technical abilities there, but there's an international building code, fire code that I'm not entirely familiar with, and I know I saw correspondence indicating that if we are not able to have, there may be, if we have just water wells feeding our sprinkler system, we may be limited to 300 guests per unit. So, like I said, the fire code is something that's beyond my technical capabilities at the moment, but I do know that there may be some limitations beyond what we're talking about here, and it's actually going to be, we're going to be limited in capacity right there. So.
Well, I guess, what I'm concerned about is a fire breaking out upstairs in the banquet and people not being able to get out. It's a frame building from what I understand. So I'd be very concerned about that. Maybe you have to add outside exits for emergency or whatever it is you're planning. I just suggested, I would hate to see a disaster. Yeah, and I'll leave that up to you to keep us informed of that. But then the other thing is traffic. Have you worked with the sheriff's office and so forth on exiting? There's no traffic controls, are there, or are there?
All these issues were addressed when we first applied for the original permit back in 2019.
Right.
So all those issues were addressed, the exiting,
right.
and we've consulted with the sheriff and things of that nature.
Okay.
Mr. Forrest here says that he can answer some of the building code issues, so I'd like maybe let him answer those questions for you.
Okay, thanks.
Just a quick answer, Commissioner. They will have to submit their plans to the state.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Into the microphone.
I'm sorry.
There you go.
The applicant will have to submit their plans to the state fire marshal, who will review them under the fire code. So that should take care of your issue.
Okay, thank you very much.
Commissioner Kavanaugh?
You represent Curtis Corporation?
No, that was the original applicant because we had it on, my client had it under contract at the time that the application was filed. So it was filed under Kurz Corporation, but my client, after the special use permit was granted, my client purchased the property and took an assignment of the special use permit.
Okay, so who's the owner now?
The current owner is, well, Linda Welch is here. It's under a corporation called Ida Inc.
Got it. And when this is up and running, do you know how many people will work there?
We estimated around 15 people would be working there. So we're looking at 300, maximum of 350, not including staff, and we estimated somewhere in the 15-person range.
Well, I got to say, this sounds really cool, and as the father of a couple of brides, and I've got another daughter going forward, this sounds like something that would be kind of a dream venue for a young woman's wedding. And providing 15 jobs in this area, I mean, that's kudos to you for doing that. It sounds great.
Yeah.
What would be the estimated time when this would open?
Well, part of the issue here was the COVID has kind of drug it out a little bit, but we're looking at breaking ground soon. It's just we got to get our plans together. We want to, we're in the planning stage, and that's why this issue came up. It's like, oh, we need more square footage. So we're still coming up with our designs, and we hope to get started soon.
I think we saw this once before, didn't we? I mean, in
Yes.
a previous
Yeah, well, obviously 2 years ago when we at that time we just had conceptual drawings and stuff like that, and but we're getting closer to the final plans here soon. So.
Well, it's a great idea, and I want to commend you for your initiative. I'm looking forward to seeing it. It's going to be a great place to visit. Thanks.
No other questions or comments? Anyone else wishing to speak during this public hearing? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. What's the will of the board? Is there a motion to approve? Motion by Commissioner Friend, seconded by Commissioner Maureen Boyle. Please vote.
I vote yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Commissioner Mike Boyle voting virtually, all other commissioners voting in person.
Thank you for being here and excited to see it. Next, we'll move to committees. The first being our finance, the budget report as presented, unless the co-chairs, Commissioner Morgan and Friend, have anything to add to that? Just as reported, all right. Next, we'll have a presentation by the Douglas County Health Department on their fiscal 21-22 budget request and the sources of funding. And Tim Kelsel, you just dropped a piece of paper walking up here.
Well, good morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
Tim Kelso. I am the Chief of Administration and Finance for the Douglas County Health Department. What you may see on the screen and what the clerk is passing out is the sheet that we have presented annually for the county board to see last year versus this year, or the current year versus next year. In terms of what we're asking for in tax support and what our proposed revenue might be and our proposed expenses. So,
Tim, can you pull the microphones together a little bit and speak a little bit more directly into them?
How's that? Better?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. So what we have, the yellow columns will be the fiscal 22 numbers. The white columns are this year's adjusted. And as we all know, we're currently dealing with COVID. Well, our fiscal 21 budget was roughly, let me see here, it was roughly about 15 million. And then you will notice that the budget here says, hey, it's 28 million. Well, that's because when COVID came, we came before the board and requested some funding from CARES Act to assist us in our pandemic response. And that number was roughly 13.5 million. So that's why under the 21 adjusted adopted budget, you'll see a total at the bottom of 28.9. Then, if you look to the first yellow column at the bottom, you'll see a new total for proposed next year of 33 million. And go, holy moly, what are you guys doing? Well, again, this is still a pandemic response. And but for the far right column, which would be the increase in taxes, which is 150,000 this year, and it's actually going to be, could be less. We meet with the Board of Health tomorrow, and I'll get some further direction from them. That number could be under 100,000 this year. But the big number you'll see is primarily based upon other federal funding and what federal funding is available. Of course, we have the ARPA, the America Recovery funding. We have FEMA funding available, and there may be some state funding through state MEMA. And that is where that big chunk will come from. None of that's coming from your general fund. And so now if you just kind of scan down the sheet to that big area that's gray, that's the demarcation between county funded and grant funded. So everything above that 5, 6, 7 line gray area is county funded. And what you'll see there is for example, the first division, the 660, it's on this sheet, it's health data and planning. That's because that's the name of it in Oracle. But that first division is really the communicable disease epidemiology section, which of course has been very active currently, and the health data folks, as well as vital statistics. Vital statistics is where you can go as a member of the public to receive your birth and death certificate. The Douglas County, being the largest county in the state, has a work share agreement with the state, so we can provide those here in Douglas County for the convenience of county residents. And because of that, that generates revenue, which basically supports that particular function. The 770,000 there covers the vital statistics section. The other things in that section are the data, the health data information. So a health department needs data to understand what's going on. And so we have 3 folks that do nothing but data down there. The next section down is the division. It's called Nutrition and Community Health here. Again, these are Oracle names. Throw that away. It's really the community health promotion and nutrition. So first of all, within this division is the WIC program. The WIC program is a grant-funded program. It's 100% funded by grants. There's no dollars here supporting WIC. The balance of that section or division, there are two functions. There's a clinic function, which would be our STD clinic, and there is the health promotion. Health promotion are the folks that assist the public in understanding a variety of public health issues, and the clinic, of course, is the STD clinic. The third one down is the Environmental Health Division. That division is primarily our inspectors. So we have the retail food, or now called food safety and compliance, or and also environmental inspectors. And the food safety folks, they are the ones that go out to the restaurants and will inspect restaurants to make sure that they're complying with the USDA requirements. And that, of course, is a big public health issue. If you have folks that aren't complying, there's a good possibility that they could be introducing some problem, some disease or sickness. So we have, give or take, about 12 folks that do those inspections. And then we have 4 that do the remaining environmental type. So that would be inspections of things for, first, pools and spas, the all of the indoor and outdoor pools that are open to the public, and some private pools are inspected by those 4 individuals. And they also do things like trash, rodents, and those types of things. The last group here is the administration group. That's primarily the directors section and my finance group. We also have within that group, we have our public PIO, we call him, Phil Rooney is covered under that section. We have a graphic artist who's been with us now, gosh, 20 some years, 25 years or so. And that's why the pamphlets and all the information you see from the department looks so nice. That's Connie Blackburn. We also have 1 data person within our section as well. So those are the basically the 4 divisions of the department that are funded in some part by county tax dollars. Then if you see revenue, the second yellow column from the left, you'll see health data generates $770,000. That is almost entirely from the sale of birth and death certificates. And so you'll see that this year the proposed tax is roughly $980,000 to cover the balance of that division. And again, that includes, in large part, the communicable disease epidemiology section. Now, not the whole section. A lot of that section is also covered by grants. Community health and nutrition, you'll see revenue there, $35,750. That's basically funds that are generated from the clinic. Down below, environmental health, those are your inspection fees. They're about $1.5 million, and you can see that then that division is covered by roughly $500,000 in tax. So everything from those 5, 6 gray lines and up is county, and you'll see that we are asking for, based on this run, about $150,000, which is within the guidelines that this board has set. Now below that line, you'll see the grants. And grants are set up and are 100% self-sufficient. If we are spending money on grant-related activities, it's money that we're getting from that grant. The county is not supporting that. Tax dollars are not supporting that. So you'll see the largest part of our budget, particularly this year, with CARES and the American Recovery Plan Act, is $33 million in expenses and about $28 million in revenue. And again, that's the total at the bottom. I'm sorry, go right there to about 5 lines down. It says grants, and then right below that is the total. You'll see $26,224,393 for expenses and the exact same amount for revenue. All of our grants are cost reimbursement. We spend it, we collect it. And so that is a net zero proposition for the county. So again, we are looking at a total request for tax dollars this year of about $4,100,000, give or take 150. And for that this year, with CARES, with ARPA, and with all our other grants for $4 million in taxes, it looks like we're going to be delivering $33 million in programs. So anyone have questions?
Any questions for Mr. Kelso? All right, seeing none, that was very thorough and a good explanation, and we appreciate the information.
Thank you.
Thank you. I do have one, Tim.
Yes,
ma'am. And I'll send you a sample. If we could, when the revenue pieces come, if those could be broken out into where they come from.
Sure.
That would be helpful for each one of these
Okay.
sections.
Be happy to
Okay,
do that.
thanks.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Do a great job. Thanks, Tim. Item 3, presentation by the Douglas County Corrections Department on its fiscal 21-22 budget request, which is in excess of their budget target amount. And here today is Director Mike Myers.
You know, I'm actually not sure how to get it to share on. Oh, okay. So it's, here. Here's the expert. Yeah. I'll watch.
All right, good morning, Commissioners. Mike Myers, Director of Corrections for Douglas County. This morning, we are going to be presenting our projected budget for the fiscal year 22 operations. And I want to give a little disclaimer up front. You're going to see a larger number at a point during the report, and then you'll see some offsetting costs that will whittle that down a little bit when we get to our final need. Some basic assumptions. This budget assumes the following. We assume in this budget that 100% of our housing units will be open for the entirety of the fiscal year. We also assume that we will remain at or near 100% staffing throughout the fiscal year. And we assume that COVID-related expenses will occur throughout the fiscal year. Hopefully that doesn't turn out to be the case, but we can't predict otherwise at this point. Moving into some obligated and ongoing contract increases. Our medical contract, which is tied to the medical version of the Consumer Price Index, or CPI, will increase in the next fiscal year by $386,000, $601,000. Our food service contract, which is tied to the general CPI, will increase $107,081. Some of the total ongoing costs of our purchase services. Basically, you'll see our budget is broken down between purchase services and personnel costs. Some of our key contracts that make up our purchase service total. This is not an all-inclusive list, but it consists of the major ones. Our medical contract, the total will increase to just under $7 million at $6,913,000. Our food service contract will be valued at $1,742,000. Our security system, this is for the maintenance and support, will be $297,915. We do have a separate cost for the installation and purchases of equipment for the new security system, which I'll talk about in upcoming slides. We do a good portion of our laundry in-house. However, we do not have the capacity to do all of the laundry required by this department. And so we have a contract with Cornhusker State Industries of the Nebraska prison system, which does the amount of laundry that we are unable to do ourselves, and that contract is for $265,000. And for just under $500,000 is our Dotcomm or technology costs. This includes a person who we contract with Dotcomm to be present at the Department of Corrections to troubleshoot and handle various projects and items throughout the day. And it includes the cost of software licenses and hardware upgrades as we need them as equipment becomes obsolete over the course of time. There are other contracts which provide programming and other services, but they are funded by the inmate benefit account. So our total of our purchased services is $13,778,367 for the upcoming fiscal year. Now we're getting into the personnel side of our budget, and we have some contractually obligated increases. We went through the exercise of actually doing all of these separately by each job title. For the sake of brevity today, we merged them by specific bargaining unit and added those totals up. Our largest contract is for our correctional officers as well as our classification officers with the FOP Lodge 8. That is 404 staff. Those are almost all correctional officers of the rank of CO1, CO2, sergeant, and lieutenant, and there are 8 classification officers included in that total. The estimated increase in their salaries from FY21 to FY22 is $1,067,525. And you'll see I have an asterisk, and I think I'm going to jump down and explain that now. We arrived at these totals by taking the average cost of living increase and step increase for each rank. We then we checked and balanced that math against the Hyperion program that payroll that runs the report on our payroll, and we found that there was a discrepancy of about $300,000, which stymied us for a little while as we were trying to figure out where our manual math and the report were different. We figured it out when we determined that there are 116 staff, or approximately 1 in 4 of our staff, are at the top of their steps and top of their scale and no longer receive a step raise, and that decreased the total back to the Hyperion report of approximately $1 million. Going back to the EULA, that contract has 32 staff. They handle a lot of the support functions and services at the jail, our records, filing inmate files, handling the communications back and forth between inmates and staff through our inmate request forms. They have been taken over the operation of virtual court, and there's other support staff included. That contract will increase in value by $95,181 for those 32 staff. We have another labor contract with 7 supervisory staff who actually basically IBEW supervises the EULA employees, and that number is a tentative amount. That contract is still under negotiation, so we know what the steps will be, but we don't know what the cost of living will be. I don't think that'll make a drastic impact on the cost of our budget, considering that it's only 7 staff members who will be impacted. But that figure of $26,237 does not include the unknown cost of living. It just includes the known steps. And then we have our non-union staff, including our leadership team and various specialists throughout the facility that handle unique functions. And those increases will run $189,500. And as I said earlier, all of those figures assume a step increase. There are people throughout all 4 of those categories listed that no longer receive a step increase. So each of those numbers is slightly less than the totals there. We have some temporary expenses. We are currently working with Dotcomm to develop a new jail management software system. This is required. They told us about a year and a half ago that our current system has become obsolete and will not be able to be supported into the future. There will be costs in the FY23 budget as well, but the cost for the coming fiscal year is $675,000 that we will pay Dotcomm to modernize and enhance the functionality of our current jail management software. We also have a temporary expense that this hit our fiscal budget last year and will continue for this year, the FY22 and FY23. We entered into agreement with a company known as CML to completely replace our aging and obsolete security system with new cameras, new door controls, basically an overall of the new wiring and overall of the entire security system throughout the two buildings on the DC campus. And we are paying for that over the course of 3 years. And this will be the second year of that cost. And that cost is $779,503. We have some temporary expenses that are related to COVID that are staffing costs, and the duration of which is uncertain. As you know, the CDC came out with a pretty dramatic shift in their guidance, but they specifically carved out correctional facilities from that guidance that was issued last week. And because of our risk, we will probably be among the last entities that return to completely normal operations. So we have, as a result of the pandemic, 2 virtual court assistants. We actually have found that with staff who are completely dedicated to that, we guessed we would have 3, but we believe we can manage that with 2. We do have to have 1 correctional officer who escorts inmates back and forth from virtual court from their housing units. They do have to be brought in because of COVID precautions. We're not bringing them in across different housing units. They're being brought in individually. They have their court appearance, and then they head back to their housing unit, and there has to be an officer present to do that. As I've told the board in some of my previous Board of Corrections reports, one of the, I guess, indirect outcomes that we've seen from the pandemic is an increase in the proportion of our population which is classified as maximum security. That our population of maximum security individuals increased by 36% from March 1st of 2020, March 31st of 2020 to March 31st of this year. That is pretty much a direct result of the slowdown or out and out for several months halting of court activity that was conducted in person. The virtual courts have been very effective in dealing with a lot of cases, but they are not appropriate for serious cases or trials, and so those more serious crimes continue to just kind of pile up in the jail. We hope now that the courts are back in full operations and that we can predict that the proportion of maximum security inmates in the jail will revert back to a more normal proportion over time. And I hope that happens during this fiscal year, but I cannot out and out tell you that it will. The end result of that is we've been staffing 3 more housing units than normal with 2 officers instead of 1 to keep them safe and to keep the inmates that are housed in those units safe. And as our population of maximum security inmates hopefully decreases over the course of the coming months, we'll be able to peel those officers off probably 1 unit at a time as we get back to a more normal makeup of our population. And we've added 2 additional officers to run sanitation equipment that we purchased last year to enhance cleaning and sanitation protocols. So we have an additional temporary expense for all these personnel items of $682,971. We have some temporary expenses also that are not COVID related, but are nonetheless temporary. I referenced that we are installing a new security system throughout the jail. That system, it will be turned on piece by piece, housing unit by housing unit, area by area. There will be a point in time at the beginning of the project. We currently staff 2 people in central control. And those 2 people are responsible for looking at approximately 400 different cameras at different times, handling emergency calls over the intercom. They handle needing to open doors for people as they move about the facility. It's a large amount of multitasking that they are tasked with. There will be a time at the beginning and end of the conversion from the old system to the new system that will have maybe 1 or 2 housing units on the new system, and the other 29 out of the housing units on the old system. They will be at completely different workstations. They'll be run in a completely different manner. So we will have to have a 3rd person in central control to operate the new system. But still, since almost all of the jail is operated on the old system, it'll still require 2 people to be tasked with supervising and operating the security for the rest of the jail. When we get to the middle of that project, we should be okay and be able to revert back down to 2, because about half the jail will be on the new system and half the jail will be on the old system. We've been operating it with 2 people successfully. But then when you get to the end of the project, there'll be almost all of the jail on the new system, but a small portion on the old system. So you require 2 people to operate the new system and still a third to operate the old system until it's no longer in place. So this is an estimate of how many officers, given that they'll be needed intermittently, the equivalent of how many officers we will need in this budget year to pay for the portions of the year that we will staff central control with 3 officers instead of 2. Now on to some new permanent requests. At previous board meetings, I've talked a lot about our need to enhance our pretrial release program. Our population is the vast majority of our incarcerated population is pretrial. We've been working with stakeholders for the past several months and will continue to do so to launch a new program, a new assessment tool with a new arrays of supervision and support. The goal will be to reduce the judges and the court's reliance on detention pretrial and put more people out under pretrial release supervision with conditions like the 24/7 program, GPS monitoring, and other programs and services that we'll put into place. It's going to be important if we're going to have credibility with the courts and the trust of the courts for them to utilize these new services, that there is a point of contact for them and that there is a point of a person who is responsible for coordinating the services and conditions of supervision for each individual placed on this enhanced pretrial release. We may hire more than one of these individuals. We'll start with one, and if it's successful and we're seeing the local jail population decrease, we can add more. I'm confident that that will not have a negative impact on our budget because we will be emptying out the jail of local offenders at that point in time. The next item for permanent request is 12 new correctional officers. We have a staffing analysis software program developed by the National Institute of Corrections, which calculates how many individuals we need to employ as correctional officers. It takes into account the number of units we project to have open. It takes into account the exception time. And by exception time, I mean any time that an officer is on duty or is scheduled to be on duty but is not at their post. So that could be vacation, that could be sick leave, that could be training, any circumstance which causes the officer scheduled to not be present. So normally those positions would be, or those posts would be filled by another officer working overtime. The software tells us how many people to hire in order where it's cheaper to actually hire more people than to pay overtime for vacant posts due to exception time. And the software indicates that we need 6 positions, which will actually result in a cost savings to the county because the cost of paying straight time to those 6 individuals will more than offset the cost of overtime should those individuals not be added. We are also requesting 3 officers to operate the body scanner during peak hours. We have reduced this from 5 to 6 officers. I've tasked our staff with identifying the times of day which are typically less busy in admissions. Weekday mornings, for instance, not only are we usually less busy, we also have more resources in the building. So we will staff for the body scanner during times when it's maybe unsafe to do so, to have our existing staff spread thin and running back and forth from pre-book to operate the body scanner. And we are also requesting 3 more officers to bolster supervision in the kitchen. We've identified that as one of the weak areas for our supervision. The sight lines in our kitchen are not very conducive to having just one officer monitor that entire kitchen. There are usually about 25 inmate workers in the kitchen on any given shift. There's lots of tools, lots of potential contraband, and we've had some damages to equipment, even if it's unintentional, just people who are inexperienced with the equipment that they're operating. And so 3 officers would add a second officer to the kitchen during its operating hours. Turning to revenue. We anticipate some changes to our per diem rates. They are still in discussion and with those entities, so I'm not quite ready to speak about them publicly, but we do expect that our per diem rates will increase by a healthy amount. As renovations are completed, like I said, we are currently renovating some units or some showers and a few housing units that'll occur between now and August. And as we hopefully are reducing or alleviating our COVID housing restrictions, we intend to allocate additional beds for contracted entities, which will also further increase our revenue. I've had some conversations with one of the main entities that we contract with, and because of changes at the federal level regarding the utilization of private prisons, they will have a much increased demand for local beds. So there is a chance that we could, if we continue to manage our local population well and our efforts for pretrial release are successful, we really will have a decision to make. Do we want a smaller operation with closed housing units, or do we want to accept revenue-producing beds at an increased level, which will be a revenue overall budget positive thing for the county to do. But our goal is to reduce the amount of local individuals in jail so that we have additional beds available for the entities that pay us to house their people in custody. And some rough math, we did not include this in our revenue budget, because this is still a little bit speculative, but I have a pretty good degree of confidence that we will increase the number of beds available to entities such as the U.S. Marshal Service at a higher rate per day, that we could increase our revenue substantially, perhaps as much as $3 million over our current levels. Other revenue, our reentry services, which is 9 staff, is 100% grant funded through 2024. The body-worn camera project is nearly 100% grant funded. And the inmate benefit account, which I referenced earlier, reimburses the general fund for 100% of all eligible expenses, such as programming and recreational equipment. Talking a little bit about reserved funds, and these are funds that, because we've been able to come in under budget, we've earmarked those funds for future years' expense. The security system that I referenced before, and the inmate tablet system, and some other smaller projects will be largely funded by using these reserved funds from previous fiscal years. We believe in total, we'll have approximately, of our spending, actual spending in FY22, approximately $1.5 million of that will come from previous budget years of savings where we've come under budget. When we understood that we weren't going to make the target, I tasked my staff with looking through all of the operational changes that in theory could be made. And there were several ideas that were put forth that I've summarized under the topic of bad ideas. I'm not going to get into them specifically today because they deal with security-related impacts. I'd be happy to talk with the commissioners in executive session about those ideas and what the risks associated with them are. But we explored 5 separate strategies that all have the ability to reduce staffing in certain functions. Each of these strategies will increase risks to safety, reduce access to attorneys and medical care and family. They will decrease cleaning and sanitation and maintenance. And we should predict some bad outcomes if we did these on a regular basis. If we implemented all of them, all 5 strategies, we would save $854,232. However, we'd be at risk in other ways that may prove to be more costly than that savings. We have some good ideas. We currently have 3 non-security posts which have not been filled during the pandemic, and we will leave them vacant until they are absolutely needed. We will intermittently and only briefly use some of the cost-saving strategies I mentioned from the previous slide to offset overtime costs when mandatory certification trainings are conducted. Some of those bad ideas, if they're not done every day and if they're only done briefly, I don't believe will have a significant impact on the safety and security of the facility or have even a measurable impact on the safety and the security of the facility. So when we're conducting trainings that pull people from their posts, we may be able to, for a shift, implement some of those modified operations so that we don't have to fill all those posts with overtime. But we only want to do that sporadically, unpredictably, and briefly. We anticipate that we can save an amount into the 6 figures with these strategies, but we'll have a more precise prediction of that as we begin to utilize them. So coming back to our expenses, our total personnel expense, this includes our security staff, our leadership team, our support and specialty positions, including the temporary positions, is $644,731. This is a summary of the major projects that we have currently going on. So we have a confluence of several things happening at once. The security system, as I mentioned, nearly $800,000, but that will be covered by funds reserved from previous fiscal years. Our inmate tablet system, we're estimating $350,000. Again, that will be funded by using funds reserved from previous fiscal years. Our jail management software is an expense that we'll reference back to in a little bit about a possibility for funding for that. And our body-worn camera project is covered by grant funding as well. So all of our expenditures that we anticipate is slightly over $52 million for the fiscal year upcoming. Oops. Now we have some funds to defray some of these costs. As I mentioned before, by reserving and allocating funds from unspent from the current fiscal year and some previous allocations that we've made, we estimate, because the current fiscal year isn't complete yet, but we estimate approximately about $1.5 million that we will not have to include in this budget. We have about $1.2 million in grant funding to cover the costs of some of the items I've listed in this presentation. And Joe Lorenz is going to talk a little bit more about the Rescue Act impact here in a moment, but we believe upon review that there's potentially up to $3 million that can be funded by the Rescue Act. So our total expenditures, as I said, were slightly over $52 million. If you subtract the reserved funds from previous budget years and our grants of $2,726,515, that leaves you with a balance requested of $49,302,890. And I think, like I said, Joe had a little bit more to talk about the potential impact of the Rescue Act on our upcoming fiscal year.
Yeah, Joe Lorenz, County Finance Director. That balance requested of $49.3 million is a little more than $2 million over target, which is a big number. So we've been looking and meeting and trying to figure out how to deal with that overage. And I am somewhat encouraged by last week the guidelines for the American Rescue Plan came out. And as we look at that, I think there are certain costs within the department proposed budget that would be eligible for American Rescue funding. Certainly the cost associated with anything directly involving COVID would qualify. There are certain costs in there for upgrading information systems that might be able to qualify. And another very interesting one that we're still exploring, because there were 150 pages worth of guidelines issued, is something called Census Track, which would have applications not only to corrections but also to things like the health department and general assistance, and that is services provided in census tract areas that have been identified as being underserved or needy, that the services provided to help those areas would be eligible for to put their expenses against the American Rescue Fund. And if you look at the census tract, it essentially covers all of northeast and southeast Omaha. So there's a lot of programs here at the jail, like community corrections and a lot of their programs where the primary beneficiary of those programs live in those areas. And, it's preliminary, but we think there is definitely a potential that we would be able to use those costs being incurred and put American Rescue funds towards them. So like I say, it's very preliminary, and we're still doing our research at this point. But they're $2 million over target, and I think that there's a solid chance that we'd be able to come back and apply $2 to $3 million of our $55 million American Rescue Fund award towards some of these expenses being incurred at corrections, which would bring them back into the target range for budget.
Okay, with that, we'll open it up for questions. Commissioner Kavanaugh?
Joe, just real quick, I should have gotten this when Tim was up there. What's the ask from the health department, similar to what we're talking about here?
It's, I don't have that sheet in front of me, but it's about $4 million. It's in that one column, and they were $150,000 year over year, which is in the target range. So, and their expenses are a no-brainer in terms of qualifying, except the latest thinking is that they would be eligible to be covered under the American Rescue Plan, but they're also eligible to be covered under FEMA. FEMA has quite a bit of money, which they've given to the state of Nebraska, $120 million, and that's being administered by HHS and Lincoln, and we're in discussions with them on, and they're allocating that money on a population basis, so Douglas County should be eligible for 30% of that. So we think we're going to be able to fund all the health department expenses through the FEMA money and HHS in Nebraska.
That's great, thank you. And just one last thing, Mr. Myers. Congratulations on your son graduating from medical school over the weekend. I got a graduate myself coming out of high school.
Thank you, Commissioner.
That's a huge thing. Kudos.
Thank you.
Commissioner Mike Friend?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mike, a great report, and of course I've seen some of this stuff, at least from a cursory standpoint. You and I have talked on a couple of occasions. It's sort of funny, I don't think I mentioned this to you, and I don't think the other commissioners know. When I talk to Joe Lorenz, maybe a couple times a week, whether I want to or not, and I was talking to Joe on the phone, and I think I had a brownie in my mouth when he told me what your budget thing looked. I almost choked. There was nobody around to give me a Heimlich either. So all jokes aside, I wanted to give Mike, I've told you this before, and it may not be, for all the commissioners and maybe people in Douglas County in general, it might not be that pertinent, but I think the unique thing about what we're dealing with right here is, of course, the pandemic. But then also, another unique aspect of this, just bear with me, is what I've always felt and what I've studied and come to the conclusion on is that we all have different ideas about what core government really should provide. Unless you're a hardcore libertarian, you don't think government should be in your life whatsoever, hardly. We all have different ideas about what are the core functions of government. The funny thing about it is, from a federal standpoint, from a state standpoint, from a city standpoint, and from a county standpoint, a core function of government of all of those entities, all of those functions is public safety. So we have Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines. We have the State Patrol. We have first responders at the state level. We have police officers and first responders at the city level. We have the Sheriff's Department, and we have corrections. And if we could all agree that the core function is right there in public safety, if we could agree on that, you would have the charge of actually the ultimate care, if you will, of taking care of an ultimate function of government. And of course, that doesn't necessarily mean a blank check. What that means is that it's really, really, really crucial to identify, I think you have, what's truly needed to satisfy that core function of government. So what I would leave it with is, and you can comment if you want, Mike, but I mean, I think it's important that we identify that, and I think you have in some of the discussions we've had and what you've laid out here. But also it's important, if you would bear with me, to keep digging, keep looking, and keep saying, how do we analyze in a way that we're not risking public safety, and keep our eyes on spending items that could be narrowed or mitigated. So this is really great. I just wanted you to know, I've told you this before, I'm saying it again, we're going to do everything that I'm going to do everything I possibly can to make sure that core function of government is being handled, but we've got some work in front of us, and I guess I wanted to thank you for the information, and I know you're open-minded and you understand the ramifications of what we're staring at here. So that's my speech. Sorry.
Absolutely, understood.
Okay. Commissioner Maureen Boyle?
Just a kind of a quick question. There are cost savings that have actually come about because of COVID, for example, virtual courts. Are you going to continue something like that as we get back to a new normal?
Yes, well, that's ultimately up to the courts, but I believe that virtual court is here to stay, and there's some good reasons for that. There are some efficiencies. Now, the thing is they won't come out of my budget necessarily, those efficiencies. They may be reflected in other agencies' budgets. It will help to an extent with our budget because it can help make the process more efficient and more timely so that individuals can get done with their punishment and move on with their lives more quickly. So but that'll be kind of a down the road sort of a savings. The immediate impact is it's a lot easier to have somebody go to court just by walking down the hall and going to a room in the jail than all the logistics that it takes, for the court staff, for the sheriff's staff, and so forth, or transferring them to other counties and back and forth. I mean, those are things that virtual court, if it's used widely, not just by us, but by other counties, that we could benefit from having people who are maybe in Sarpy County have a virtual court hearing for Douglas County so that they can get their matter disposed of without having to wait to be done with Sarpy and then transfer here. So yes, I do believe that we need to make virtual court a way of life for certain cases, and it'll be a benefit to a lot of different agencies and to the community.
Yeah, I completely agree. Great, thanks.
I think, Mike, one of the things, this would be a good time since it's budget time and we're talking about potential cost savings to really look at the development of a night court or a weekend court. Again, the savings there to me are kind of obvious because you wouldn't be holding folks in the facility and the need for additional staff or additional overtime. So anyway, I think that business plan is well overdue. I think I've brought this up, I don't know how many years in a row, but I think it's time that we look at it and take a serious look with all system partners to see if it's a possibility.
Agreed, and I think the advent of virtual court makes that much more appealing.
That's right.
We have mentioned that also I've taken that message to the judiciary repeatedly, but I think now that virtual court is here, that they may be a little more open-minded to those ideas.
Okay, any other question? Commissioner Mike Boyle?
Yes, I just wanted to support you on that night court. It's way overdue, and you have pushed that years. And I think the solution, the judges who are presently on the bench, I don't think are interested in that. But I think what we need to do is look at what Governor Thone did years ago. I believe he appointed Rosemary Skrupa, a late attorney, and she was really a very excellent judge. And she came in and took over some court load. And I really think we ought to be asking for a night court judge specifically, so that when someone is hired, they know they're going to be doing that kind of work. And it could be excellent because we have people, Mike will support this, I believe, who are stuck in the jail over the weekend and so forth, and it really drives up the cost. The other thing I was going to suggest is that I think we ought to take another stab at funding from the state. Now, I know that Governor Heineman just cut that out, but I think it's a big item because most of the people who are in there are charged with, well, many of them are charged with state offenses, and we get paid nothing. And it's something we should explore maybe through NACO to try to get that reinstated. The other thing I'd like to suggest is I don't know what the care is that is rendered by our health contractor. I mean, I think it may be, you know, colds and coughs and some other things like that. They get into serious things. We have some people go by ambulance to the hospital, of course. But I wonder whether we couldn't be looking at asking, and I've brought this up before, but maybe a coalition between UNMC and CHI and Clarkson to come together and provide medical students to come in there and also some other staff, because I think they're treating some minor illnesses, and I don't know that we need to spend $6 or $7 million a year on it. And maybe we could figure out a way to get them involved and have them rotate through. It would be a great experience, and we could save a lot of money, and I think they would do an excellent job. So I'd like us to explore that. We have some other, you know, the psychiatric operations of UNMC and CHI, I believe, are merged, and so there's some great cooperation. But I'd like to see us explore that and ask Mike to do that. But I'm curious, first of all, what are the services that are being provided by our current healthcare provider? You know, I guess without a lot of work, if you can, you know, you'd have to include the emergencies, but I don't think most of this is emergency kind of work. So, Mike, that was an excellent presentation on that, as well as the health department, both really informative, and I really appreciate it. Good luck to you. Thanks.
Thank you. And to answer your question, I mean, the medical care that's provided on site basically is everything short of what you need to go to an emergency room for or to be hospitalized for.
Right.
And so each individual is screened and given a health assessment during the booking and classification process during their first few hours in our custody. There's history and physicals, which are done within the first 2 weeks of being in custody. There's X-ray, dental services, you know, the chronic care in terms of managing diabetes and high blood pressure, and then all of our psychiatric services are also covered under that contract as well.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments for Mike? All right, thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thanks, Mike.
Next, we'll move to Child and Youth Services. We have a resolution to approve the agreement between the City of Omaha and Douglas County Youth Center regarding providing booking and pre-adjudicated detention of juveniles under the age of 18 at the Douglas County Youth Center. And this is just a continuation of a contract that needed to be renewed. Is there a second? Motion by Commissioner Rogers, seconded by Commissioner Morgan. Please vote.
Is there a public hearing on this?
I vote yes.
I'm sorry, did somebody say something? Oh, I'm sorry, Luis, I didn't see you wanted to speak. Go ahead and come on up. Can you hold off the vote?
Switches.
Luis Jimenez, 3306 Birch Street. I would like to remind the board that there's concern about disproportionate minority contact in the juvenile system. And right here, you have in front of you a point of contact that needs to be looked at. And I haven't heard much discussion about that the last 4 years, 3 years that I've been attending these public meetings. The Omaha Police Department is the organization that brings most of the youth to the county system. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else wishing to speak? All right, please vote.
Okay.
I vote yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Commissioner Mike Boyle voting virtually, other commissioners voting in person.
Next item is under Community Services, and it's a resolution allowing a one-time waiver to accept a late visitor improvement fund grant application for an applicant. And again, this was brought about because we kind of practiced it, but it wasn't formal, and this is making it formal that each organization would get one forgiveness of being late and presented to the committee for consideration. So with that, are there any questions or comments? Is there a motion to approve? Motion by Commissioner Maureen Boyle, seconded by Commissioner Rogers. Please vote.
I vote yes.
And Commissioner Rogers. Motion passes 7-0. Commissioner Mike Boyle voting virtually, all other commissioners voting in person.
All right, with that, we will move to Human Resources, the weekly personnel report from Civil Service as presented, unless someone has questions or comments. And then our legislative issues. Again, the report is in your packet, but we are again closely watching what happens these last few weeks of the legislative session. They were off since last Friday and yesterday, so they're back on track today. But again, if anyone has any interest in any of the legislative bills, please let me know. But again, we're just kind of watching and seeing what else happens down there. All right, with that, we do have need for an executive session for labor negotiations and litigation. Is there a motion to go to? Did you have legislative issues?
Yes.
Okay.
If I may, Teresa York, County Attorney's Office, for when we get to exec, if it could be for labor negotiations and legal advice.
Legal advice,
yes,
sorry.
that'd be wonderful.
Yep,
Thank you.
Yep. Oh, and personnel. Yep.
Larry Storr, 5015 Lafayette, 68132. My main legislative issue comments today are watching the laws on childhood education and early childhood education and what's going on with the Omaha Public Schools now, even kids in kindergarten, because it all starts down there, but also about the elections. I want to read something real quick that the press doesn't tell us about and remind us about how many times Democrats have challenged election results going way back 2000, before 2020, 4 or 5 times. But I'm called deplorable because I want people to challenge election results when it looks like there's something afoot. We keep being told that there's nothing afoot, but they keep finding things. The evidence is whoever runs the elections and supervises the elections and the people and the ballots, after all these years, haven't worked out a foolproof system. We citizens expect our elected and appointed officials to work out an anti-fraudulent election system. Without any factions, Democrat or Republicans need to fix it, but they also need to find out and admit if there was fraud. And if there was fraud, let's put the president back in office. That's what citizens expect. The only way we can alter or throw off that government is through an amendment that we could propose. The only alternative to that, ladies and gentlemen, is open civil war. And if you're anybody paying attention, that may very well happen in this country before very long. A lot of it because of this election thing that our elected people will not admit or solve. Thank you.
To executive session. Oh, sorry, Commissioner Mike Boyle.
Yes, I just want to say that these stories about fraud are absolutely, well, I'd like to use a word that says BS, but I don't want to say that on my count in the meeting, but it is absolutely absolutely a fallacy. I was involved in bringing in the electronic system that counts those ballots, and it's so accurate. You know, I'll call to mind the first time I ran for mayor, I was being interviewed by Channel 6 because I had lost the election to Alvez. And I was being interviewed, and I remember the reporter saying, "Now, what do you plan to do now?" And I said, "Well, I'll go back to practicing law." And a big hoop went up in the hall, and I turned around, and the election returns had flipped. And what happened was people vote, and they come in waves, and different people vote from different parts of socioeconomic areas, and that's what happens. So I mean, this idea that the former president was winning and suddenly it flipped is just a fallacy, and it is very destructive to our system of democracy. And what's happening is unconstitutional, unethical, and absolutely uncalled for. And so for suggesting that there's fraud, prove it, and you can't. The former president filed 62 lawsuits and lost every one of them, even to his own judges. So this needs to be put to bed, and talk of civil war is absolutely outrageous. And frankly, I wish we could, I wish we could do something to get people to stop bringing that up, because it is absolutely destructive to our system of government, and I'm getting pretty angry about it. People need to get a life, do some charitable work, do some good for someone else, and quit complaining about something that did not happen. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now move to, no. We are now going to move. Larry, you're out of order. You're out of order, Larry. Out of order, Larry. Mr. Salazar. You're on mute. There you go. Nope, we just took you off. Nope, we didn't.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah, I in response to this gentleman's accusations and chicken little theories, I'm neither a Republican nor a Democrat, but I am a veteran and I am a citizen of this country. And it does, I don't know if the right word is alarm me, because this gentleman's accusations and warnings are being spread like lies throughout the rest of this country. And at a certain level, especially at the level of city government and county government, I would expect people to speak in terms of actual facts and truths, and not just throw out these accusations that have no merit, no basis in fact. All this nonsense about socialism. Well, we've had socialism in this country since the inception, meaning we share certain responsibilities, financially, ethically, morally, economically. So this nonsense about socialism creeping in, it's crept in. We're a part of it. There's aspects of it right now, and he's probably taking benefit of some aspects of socialism. So this is just alarming to me that the level of intellect has reached such a low point in some of these discussions. It's almost laughable. I mean, I just wanted to let my own opinion as an independent person making observations about what surrounds me in this country. So if you don't have any truths, any facts from which to make these accusations, mum's the word.
Thank you. I am going to cut off conversation on this because it does not have anything to do with our legislative agenda. We are going to move to executive session for for legal advice, union negotiations, and personnel. Is there a motion? Motion by Commissioner Rogers, seconded by Commissioner Friends. Please vote.
I vote yes.
Yeah. And then at 1 o'clock, I just want to remind everyone, Commissioner Chris Rogers does have a Child and Youth Committee meeting in room 903. Okay, thank you.
Motion passes 7-0. Commissioner Mike Boyle voting virtually, other commissioners voting in person.